Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. If you've ever struggled with fear, shame, or self-doubt, this week's guest knows that journey and what it takes to transform it. A childhood marked by adversity, encompassing abuse, epilepsy, speech impediment, and relentless bullying, could have easily defined Joy Baker's life. Instead, she chose to rise above it. Painfully shy and disconnected from people, she found connection and a sense of safety working with horses who taught her compassion, presence, and how to feel safe in her own skin. A gifted and compassionate healer who specializes in helping others move beyond emotional blocks, limiting beliefs, and energetic constraints, Joy Baker now uses her lived experience to help others face their inner pain, release the past, and reclaim their power. Joy Baker joins me today to share the books that supported her healing journey and the insights that helped her turn pain into purpose. Joy Baker, welcome.
Hi, Sandy. Thank you for having me on your show. It's so great to be here.
So tell me about your relationship with books.
Well, it started when I was a child. I loved horses. I think my first word was horse. So I read everything I could, from the school library on horses. And then when I ran out of that, I read every animal book I could. And when I ran out of that, I went back to the horse books and I read, and I would read sometimes a book a day. I'd go to school, come home, do my chores and read. And then it was my way of escaping what was a lot of turmoil and stuff going on in my life growing up, the abuse and bullying, and there was stuff going on at home as well. And so my reading about horses, and then I got some plastic horses and moved into that and then eventually got horses. So, but that was, once I started actually working with horses, then I didn't have time to read as much, but it was my escape. And it was, I could create another life for myself.
What was it about horses?
Probably a past life thing. I just loved horses. And really what it was, though, was a connection, which I didn't realize at first. But with a horse, there's a connection with the horses, like, as far as I'm concerned, no other. It was just like you mentioned when you were talking there at the beginning, feeling safe with them. I felt safe with them. And I didn't realize this at the time until I started on this path. But I had a way with, horses, especially more when I started with race horses that had been abused, or I just trusted them and they trusted me where they didn't trust anybody else. And it was that connection with them. That was even before I got a horse. It was just, I could feel that connection. I'm sure there's some past life stuff there as well.
You're not a Sagittarius by any chance, are you?
Virgo.
Because
Yeah.
Sagittarians love horses.
Oh, really?
I've never met one that doesn't.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Well, maybe you've got Sagittarius prominent in your chart, but as you say, it could be a past life thing.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think it's every little girl's dream, isn't it? I want a pony. Buy me a pony. Put in the yard.
Yeah, it was that connection. And with the horse, I could feel safe. And it was the warmth, when it was just, I was just born to work with horses in the first part of my life. So, but that's really what got me into books. And when I realized I could go to the school library and get books out, as many as I wanted, the librarian got to know me. And any books that came in about horses or animals, she would put them aside until I came in. and have the books ready for me.
When did your spiritual journey begin?
That I was 33, so 32, I guess. So it's 30 years ago. And still on the racetrack at the time, but I met somebody there he was just a friend working in another barn. And he was on the personal growth path, and I'd never heard of it before. Like the first part of my life, first half of my life was very 3D consciousness about lack and limitation, and I can't, and feeling, all the worthlessness and shyness in that. And once he introduced me to this, I just went, wow, what is this? And then I was still in the racetrack, and I took Tony Robbins' Fire Walk. And it was really my first workshop. That was 30 years ago. And that was when I really gained an understanding of the mind and our beliefs and all of that. That really changed my life.
And then many of these books.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll start with book 1, which is Awaken the Giant Within: How to Take Immediate Control of Your Mental, Emotional, Physical, and Financial Destiny, by Tony Robbins, published in 1992. Was that the first spiritual book that you read?
I had read, I think, a couple before, but it was the one that really stands out because I was on the racetrack still at the time with the horses. I was in an 8-year relationship that was falling apart, and I just, because of the environment on the racetrack had changed, and I didn't have that same kind of connection with horses, the emotional connection. It was just became a really stressful environment, and I knew something had to change. And in that book, the first chapter says, if you want to make a change, make a big decision and make a big change. And so I left my whole life as I'd known it up until then, walked away from the horses, left the 8-year relationship. All my friends were on the racetrack. Anybody I knew, I walked away from it all, left it all behind, and just started over. And that was a real start of my path. But that book, it was just make a big decision and make a big change.
Wow. So what did you do when you walked away? What were you doing to earn a living, and how did your life change?
Well, it changed completely. I I was doing a network marketing, and I was actually okay at that. I was making a little bit of money with it. And unfortunately, I had somebody who had a little place I could stay on their acreage. So I was able to stay there. So I didn't have to pay rent. That really helped me out. And so I did network marketing, but that wasn't working out anymore. So I asked myself, and by this time I was just reading books all the time. I was going to the library or buying them, or it was just books all the time. And I thought, what is my greatest fear? Well, I was terrified of people. I really didn't know people. I knew horses, but not people. And so I said, well, I don't know how to talk to people. And this was back in 1996. The cell phone wasn't really around. It was around, but not as popular then. And so I started telemarketing. I got a job telemarketing, and terrified. I mean, to pick up the phone and just cold call, but that was a fear I had, and I knew that fear was keeping me stuck. And then after that, that company fell apart. After that, I thought, okay, what's my next fear? Well, I was still around people. So I got a job going door to door, and, walking up to a door and selling coupons. That's a really good way to get over the fear of people. So,
Very brave. Yeah.
yeah.
Very brave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Book number 2 on your list. I was really intrigued to see this because this is a book that I read very early on and loved it, and have often quoted him. And I think this may be the first time in 5 years that anybody has ever put it on their list. So I'm intrigued to hear what you're going to say. The book is Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, published in 1960. And, a classic that sold millions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Classic. It's about self-image to me. And as I remember it, it just changed my whole life. It's like self-image. This is why I feel this way about myself. And I've done all this work. By then, it had been a couple years, but I thought it was a lot. And I'd done all this work on myself, but I still feel this way about myself. But then, Maxwell Maltz, he was a plastic surgeon, and he would do some kind of procedure, but the person still, it didn't change for the person where everybody else could see the difference. And I'm like, that's why I feel this way. And it was learning about self-image and how our self-image is created and how it controls our life. That was a game changer for me. That one stands out, and it's still one to, like, when you first, asked about the top 10, it's been a while since I really read a lot of books, because it came to a point in my life where I had to take action. But so these are when I first started on this spiritual path. But psychocybernetics has always stood out, and I recommended it to many of my clients, because if you're confused, or why do I feel this way, or why have I changed everything but I still feel this way, psychocybernetics explains it.
Yeah, it does indeed.
Yeah, that book was a game changer.
Homecoming, Reclaiming and Healing Your Inner Child by John Bradshaw, published in 1984.
Yeah, that's all about the inner child. And I've realized as I've been on this path, and at first, the inner child, I wanted nothing to do with the term, the concept, what it was about. To me, it was fluffy. I used to work with horses, and I was all about being tough. And the inner child, I thought it was kind of fluffy. But I've realized the more we can have a relationship with our inner child, and we talk and communicate with our inner child, the more the child within us feels safe. And then we can ground into that. And this book had so many exercises about, connecting with your child and learning how to nurture the child and yourself. I mean, you're one. And that book is just so powerful. It's the most important relationship a person can have is with themselves and their child. And it took me a long time to really realize that. But once I did, this book was, these books were all game changers for me.
I mean, did you just go to bookstores and look for things that attracted you, or did you have friends passing books on? How did you find a lot of these books?
Honestly, I don't remember. I think a lot of them just came to me. Homecoming might have been, I think Dove might have referred it, Dove Bear, because I was working with him for a while, like one-on-one. He was my therapist, and I went to his workshops, and I think he might have referred it, but I don't really remember. But yeah, I think a lot of them just came in my life. Or I would go to bookstores. Yeah, to me, a bookstore became like a candy store. I just loved bookstores and searching for books and seeing what was out there. And I've been fortunate in that the universe has brought, whether it's teachers or books, it's like when I'm ready, I've always had authentic teachers and guides, and really powerful books have come into my life when I'm ready.
Yeah. Book number 4, love this one too, Molecules of Emotion, The Science Behind Mind-Body Medicine by Candice Pert, 1997.
Yeah, that was such a good book. It really helped me to understand how, mind body is connected, and how, we hold on to our emotions, and how emotions, how they work. It just gave me a really good understanding. And it's a lot of what I do, now in my work and when I'm working with clients, because that's what I do, is I focus on an emotional realm. And this gave me a really good understanding of how, if we don't express those emotions, or if we don't somehow work through them, they're going to get stuck in our bodies. And it's going to cause, whether it's illness or arthritis or lack of flexibility, hard to move, all of that. Such an important book. Anybody who wants to understand the mind-body connection, highly recommend it.
Yeah. I was looking at your list this morning and talking to my daughter-in-law, who's a kinesiologist, and I was telling her about this particular book. And funnily enough, a book came up in conversation with her that is the next one on your list. Again, a book that doesn't come up as often as I think it should, but a truly, truly remarkable book. Hands of Light, Guide to Healing Through the Human Energy Field by Barbara Brennan, 1987. So talk about synchronicity. You know, we
Yeah.
had 2 today.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, that book's all about energy techniques and learning different energy techniques. And once I realized along my journey that we are energy, and I learned pretty, quickly within, the first couple of years of being on the path. And then I just couldn't get enough of energy and learning about energy and hands of light. It's just so many different exercises in there, techniques, and really even the ones with the hand, rubbing your hands together and then feeling the energy. When I, first started doing that, I was fascinated. I can feel the energy. So yeah, that one is anybody who wants to learn about energy and learn different energy techniques. Love that one.
Mm. Yeah, I think we lost somebody really remarkable when she passed. Really enjoyed her work. So book number 6. This appears in the top 10 all the time. Celestian Prophecy by James Redfield, published in 1997, and of course it was such, a big mainstream hit when it was published back then.
This was a book, I read this book probably 29 years ago, 28 years ago. And this was a book that introduced me to energy and energy fields because I remember reading one of the chapters and they're talking about how energy flows between people. And it was like, oh my gosh, everything makes sense. I was really my first time I'd really heard of energy. And it's like, this is how we're connected. And I had I think I had some kind of a knowing that we can't just be all these separate beings and everything separate. But then when I read Celestian Prophecy and I realized there's one chapter where 2 people are talking and energy is flowing between them. And that still stands out. Almost 30 years later, I still remember that. And then actually after that, in an appointment with my therapist right after that, I'd gone about halfway through the book. And he told me I said, is energy real? Like, is it a real thing? And he told me taught me about chakras and in that session. And I still remember learning about chakras and just being fascinated. And then, so that book really led me into understanding energy.
Yeah.
Or opening me up to it.
I think one of the things that I took from that book is the knowledge that you can very easily, if you're not careful, steal energy from others. And you've got to think about the kind of energy that you're putting out to them when you're speaking to them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good one. Of course it is. That's why it was a
Yeah.
Number 7, another, again, this doesn't come up as often as it should, but it's one that I'm always quoting. You'll See It When You Believe It by Wayne Dyer, published in 1989.
Wayne Dyer. When he passed, we lost a great man, but I can still feel him up there looking down on us. This book was, to me, it's about when you vision it, and you see it in your mind and you can feel it and your heart's connected to it. That's when, like, when you can see it in your mind and believe it and believe that it's real. It's just in the energetic form. It's going to happen. And Wayne Dyer, and he was just such an amazing man and so down to earth and authentic that, yeah, I read everything. In fact, when I was still on the racetrack, I would be cleaning stalls with my, back when the Walkman was around, and I'd have my earphones in and listening to Wayne Dyer. And that book, I mean, all his books stand out, but that book, because to me, it's all, just about vision. And when you vision something, you believe it, you believe it in your heart and soul, and you connect to it with your heart, then it will manifest in your physical world.
Yeah. Book 8, The 3 Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth by Dolores Cannon, published in 2011.
Such an amazing book. When I read that book, even just the first couple chapters, it was like, I read that book probably it was one of the more recent books I read 5 years ago, maybe. And it was like everything in my life made sense. It's like, that's why I had to go through that and that trauma and that abuse and that happened. It was about the light workers coming down to Earth after World War II, and why they started coming down after World War II, and why the light was needed at that time. My whole life started making sense. It was like it literally brought everything together for me. And it's like, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I've gone through everything I've gone through. So that book was, again, it was another game changer for me.
Tell me more about the 3 waves of volunteers. Why 3 waves?
By now, there's probably more, since she's probably on the 4th or 5th wave. So after World War II, when the people we started with nuclear power, and they realized up there that, according to the book, we were going to destroy ourselves with nuclear power if we didn't start uh, moving up to a higher consciousness and awakening to divine light. So volunteers from up there would come down here to Earth to start seeding the light. The first wave of volunteers started just after World War II. So they would be in their probably 70s, 80s, 90s now. The second wave of volunteers, they would have came, to Earth around 50s or 60s. And you've got your third wave. So each wave of volunteers, like light workers that volunteers to come to Earth, is bringing more and more light. And every time as more light workers come to Earth, they are increasing the light and the consciousness on planet Earth. Like, I believe that's why we're going through the past 5 years, what we've been going through. I call it the Great Awakening, and a lot of chaos and a lot of things happening in the world, but people are awakening. But that's because for the past, 80 years, light has been seeded on the Earth from the light volunteers. The people walking Earth, that when they were up there, they volunteered to come down here and to act and be as a light worker.
So does she give any indication of where we're going, what it's going to be like in 10, 20, 40, 50 years?
Remember, the last chapter goes more into the new Earth. The first couple of chapters, as I remember it, gave me an understanding of why I'm here, and basically just what I said there. And then she goes into past life regressions, and she went really, really deep with people. Some people who had off-world memories and memories of losing time in that. And then she brings it all together with, the last chapter is all about the new Earth, and it's very optimistic and what we're moving forward to. I don't remember any kind of a timeline predictions, but I just remember that last chapter being really optimistic about where we're moving forward to.
Book number 9, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, How to Recognize It and How to Respond, by Patricia Evans, published in 1992.
Yeah, that book was a game changer as well, because it introduced me to, and I read this in 2000. It was when I was in counselor training, and there was a book for the course, but then I also wanted to read more about, communication. And I didn't know anything about, now it's quite common, the empath narcissistic relationship. And often when you're an empath and in a relationship with a narcissist, you're dealing with a lot of abuse. And especially if you grow up with one. I just thought that was how people talked to me. I didn't know how to understand, witness, define, and realize what was, abusive, and what was manipulating or gaslighting or anything like that. So that book really made me realize how I was being spoken to in a lot of cases, but also how I would speak to others, and what is like passive aggressive communication and what is authentic communication. That was a really powerful book for me.
Yeah, it should be taught in school, shouldn't it?
Yeah, should be.
Book 10, Codependent No More, How to Stop Controlling Others and Start Caring for Yourself, by Melody Beattie, published in 1986.
That was my first look really into codependence. and understanding what codependence was. And in fact, I just referred it to a client of mine a little while ago, and she got to one page and there's a list of codependent behaviors. She said, I have every one of them. And we don't even realize it's codependence because human relationships are based on need, and they're, most often transactional. And often that leads to codependence. And we're so used to it that we don't realize these are codependent, even sometimes needy behaviors. And that book really opened me up to what codependence is, what a needy behavior is, and opened me up to having more authentic relationships, and also the desire for authentic relationships, because I understood what it was. So that was a very powerful book as well.
Mm.
No, they
Yeah,
all were.
clearly.
Yeah.
So that's your 10 best list. Let's talk about you. You said that you really were inspired by Tony Robbins and what he said about making a big change. And how hard was that for you to make that change and leave behind the horses, which you've had a lifelong love with and attraction for and felt so safe with? I mean, did you have to wrestle with that for a long time?
I did. I think if I'd known what I was getting into on this path, it's a good thing we don't know everything that's ahead of us, or sometimes we'd stay, stuck. But I really felt like I had no choice. I had to move on. There was something within me saying there's got to be more. And with the horses and with my 8-year relationship, I'd lost that emotional connection. And I didn't understand any of this at the time. I just knew I had to move on. And yeah, it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I felt guilt for years after that. And it wasn't even so much about the relationship, it was about leaving the horses. Horses were they were my heart and soul, and they were everything. And even though there's always other people to take care of the horses, I just felt, I dealt with a lot of guilt about leaving the horses. But I actually, after I left the horses, I met somebody who ended up becoming my therapist for, and the workshops and that for the longest time. And I had 3 sessions with him. And I remember after that doing a pros and cons sheet of list of what if I didn't change? What if I didn't go through this? Because I was just starting to understand what I was getting myself into. And then I went, and these are all the reasons I should, or I want to move forward. But I realized even after 3 sessions of therapy, I couldn't go back. And it's like, once you're on the path, you can't go back. And I couldn't go back to that life of, no connection. And I was working 7 days a week. Back then on the racetrack, it was 7 days a week. And I couldn't do that any longer. My body wouldn't hold up. So I knew I had to go forward. But yeah, that was definitely the hardest thing I've done in my life.
Yeah. I mean, it is very hard. And, I think what I say to people, if you really have a big decision to make, just project in front of you what your life might be like in 5 years if you don't make it. Because for me, when I was wrestling with the idea of leaving my family behind and going to America to live, it was such a huge decision for me. I couldn't until I realized that the fear of not doing it was bigger than the fear of doing it. And at that point, it was okay. That gave me the impetus to do it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I love that. I love that statement.
I think, we have to get to that point where so if I don't do it, what's going to happen? And I just couldn't bear that. It's an interesting one. These, and the thing about human nature is that we forget is that, it's natural for us when we're in unknown situations. The biggest imperative is to make ourselves safe and secure. So, we can step out there because that gene, that part of us is going to take care of making sure that it's not the unknown for long.
Mm-hmm. And one of the one of the things I'll always remind myself of and my clients is trust. Just trust that you're going to be not taken care of, but, looked out for by a power far greater than you. We have the whole angelic universe looking out for us and guiding us. And if we will just trust, fear blocks all of that. And I get fear. I mean, I used to be scared of everything except for animals and nature. I was just scared. And so I get there's fear, but when you can move into trust, and there's times I've just said that word, I'm in so much of, fear or worry. I used to worry all the time. I've since, much better about that, but I'll just say the word trust over and over again. Trust, trust, trust. And I start to feel that within me, it creates that vibration. And then I can feel my whole body relax. And then I open up to, receiving support, and I know everything's going to be okay. And that can be really powerful if you're feeling scared or there's a lot of unknown, because one thing for sure in life is change. We're going to experience change, and which, where, like you talked about being safe and comfortable. So yeah, there's going to be fear, but when you can trust it's going to be okay, and you can really start to feel that, and when you can know and trust that there's a power greater than you that is supporting you, then a lot of that fear of the unknown and the change will just fall away.
Now, you've talked about your life, the first part of your life, of you being very introverted. When you left that part of your life behind and went off and did the network marketing, and what was it that actually brought you into the spiritual arena? It's one thing to make a change because you need to change your life. It's another to actually really dive in to the spiritual arena and start changing your beliefs.
Well, the fire walk, Tony Robbins' fire walk, was a big thing. That was major. But I think really when I think about my path was the Celestian Prophecy, because it opened me up to realizing that energy connects us all. And when I realized that, then I just dived right into energy work, and I couldn't get it. I read everything I could on energy. And then I found EFT, emotional freedom technique. And I realized that was a key point for me, because I realized that anything came up, any trauma I went through, 8 years of repressed memories around sexual abuse. And so anything that came up, I could tap it away. And here's an energy technique that I could, use to deal with trauma and such. And that empowered me. So I think it was just realizing that as as we start on the path, you start to remember things. And generally at first it's trauma and abuse and such. And I started to remember more and more. I just thought before I got on this path, I just thought I had a great childhood. And then the repressed memories. Oh,
You thought you did, even though you were bullied, even though you were abused, you thought you had a good childhood?
well, I just shut it all down. I was completely numb. Like I was as numb as you can get. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel any emotions. I had to learn what emotions were. I had to learn what feelings were. And I didn't know what happiness was. I was just completely, absolutely shut down. So and because of the epilepsy, that was like partial amnesia. So between being shut down and the epilepsy, I just didn't remember anything. So I just assumed, I didn't really think about it. I just assumed I had a great childhood until the repressed memories started. And I knew I was shy, but again, I just thought everybody was like that. I really lived in my little world, and it was a world of horses, and everything else was blocked out. So basically I had to learn how to live again when I started on this path. And for me, the real defining moment was learning about energy and how that keeps us all connected. And then learning different energy tools and realizing that, I could move energy. I could release stuck energy within me, any trauma that came up, or I could change that through, tapping or different techniques. And plus, when I first started on the path, I went to a workshop that said, write a vision. And I'd never heard of a vision before, but I'd had, I was been on the path about a year, and I realized it was starting to really support me. And I wanted to do this for others. I was all about making a difference. And so I wrote a vision out that I wanted to be a coach. At that time, I still don't know about energy. So it was about a coach and I wanted to make a difference. And I had to do 20 years of inner work on myself first, so to believe in myself and to believe in my value before I started my healing business. But it was having that vision was what kept me moving forward because I wanted to make a difference. That was all I knew. And then it just, kind of progressed from there.
So you obviously you offer private sessions, you coach. What techniques are you using? I mean, you've obviously got a tool bag full of them.
Right. It's not so much a technique. It's all the years of work I've done on myself and the healing and such. So I deal with emotional trauma. I deal with trauma that's stuck within a person's unconscious energies. And I'll just hear their story and then I'll look at, and again, it's not a specific technique. It's just I will hear from my guides where they're stuck. It might be an emotion, it might be a belief, it might be a pattern. And then we'll just, with my guide support, of course, release that stuck energy. And once we do that, it just opens everything up. And then we just follow the stream of consciousness. And it's all about the whole intention of the session is to bring them into a higher consciousness so that they're feeling happy, relaxed. They feel good about themselves. They feel empowered. But it's not really a specific technique. It's listening to my guides and hearing what they have to say. I'm just the, physical
Conduit.
messenger.
You're the conduit.
Yeah.
When you look back on that childhood and, with those memories having surfaced, and I can imagine it took a lot of work, to get rid of the stuck energy there. Did you find forgiveness?
Forgiveness, not in the traditional sense. It's a good question. Not in the traditional sense in that, which is, I forgive you, like what you did, it's okay. And that's traditionally how I think we've thought of forgiveness. I have found forgiveness, and it took a long time to come to it, where it's like, okay, that happened and I value myself. It's like, I wish you the best, and they're all past now, but but I wish you the best, and I'm moving forward with my life, and I'm starting my business, and I'm creating this. And so that, and forgiveness in that way. Yeah. Instead of, like, often when we go through, abuse growing up, we're stuck because we're waiting for an apology from that person, and it's rarely going to come. And when we can realize we're not going to get an apology, but we can still believe in ourselves and feel good about ourselves and value ourselves and let that go, often, people are freed up and they're like, oh, finally, I can move forward. I can let go of that. And that's, that kind of forgiveness. Yes.
Mm. I mean, self-value is so important, and yet it's one of the biggest things that our society structures, are geared towards taken away from us. Any sense of us having value.
Absolutely. It's so important. And yet when we don't have value, when we don't value ourselves and recognize our worth, we can be easily controlled. And then we can fall victim to the fear narrative.
Yes.
And which is just, that's marketing. I mean, it's global marketing now, but it's, the fear narrative is being marketed to us. And like, I couldn't start my healing business, which is about 10 years ago, until I started to really value myself. I've gone through 2 bankruptcies, and I would work hard, but I could never make much money. I hardly made any money. And it was just, I couldn't get to that place of valuing myself. I mean, I felt beyond worthless when I started on this path. And I had to pick myself up from there, plus learning how to deal with people, because they were like another species to me. And so it's been an interesting journey, but finally it took me about 20 years. I said, okay, it's time. Quit the job I had and just, not that I recommend people do that because I didn't have any money at the time. And just with a little bit I had, I started out on my healing business. But it took me valuing myself and recognizing my worth and recognizing what I could offer others to really launch my business. Yeah, valuing yourself. And I just want to mention, whatever you've gone through, any trauma or abuse or experiences, they don't define you. You decide who you are. You're beautiful inside. You're magnificent inside. You're amazing. You're here for a reason. And what you've gone through in your childhood or anything that happened as an adult, that doesn't define you. It's part of your experience.
So you don't ever find that when you're working with people who've had, emotional abuse, that it triggers memories for you, that it can bring up stuff in you that you then have to work through?
It did. It actually surprised me when I started my business, because after the intense work I'd done, I really thought, I thought everything was cleared out. But yeah, there was stuff that came up, and I still had to do a lot of, especially around family and siblings, especially as my parents got older and I spent more time with my siblings again because I had to help out with their care. All that came up. I was not expecting that. And then but I found that just as I deal with something, work through something, and I feel like it pretty good about it, then somebody will come to me with literally the same issue and I'm able to support them. So, but yeah, when I started on this path and like my business and working with clients, it took my healing work to a whole deeper level. Which I totally didn't realize. I really thought I was in a pretty good place, but when I started working with clients, it's pretty good now. But I mean, I can't really think of the last time I really got triggered. But the first few years, yeah, I had to go deep.
This is a point people overlook a lot. And I have a friend who says she works with children, and she said, I can't work with any child until I've had the experience and integrated it within me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can be of benefit to them. And, I do think that's something that's really important for people to take on board, because often we meet other people from here
Mm-hmm.
and not whole body.
Right, right. Yeah, when you've gone through that and had that experience and you've, released it and cleansed it out, then you can still have compassion and empathy for somebody, but when you've actually gone through it yourself, then it just goes so much deeper, being able to support somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. You get asked to appear on a lot of podcasts and summits. What are the things that people most want to ask you or have you speak about?
Uh, well, my story, like you've been doing, but also, I guess, fear. I talk about fear a lot. Because I've gone through a lot of it. But also believing in yourself, like how to believe in yourself. I also, on many shows, will work with people or even just questions and do, the kind of healing work I do it very briefly. So sometimes I'll offer that. But mostly it's about generational trauma, how trauma, beliefs, patterns, traumas, things we say are passed down generation to generation. And I've, the ancestral lineage in that, do some talk about how things are passed down. So generational trauma is one of the topics.
Yeah, because for many people, the problem isn't with them.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
occurred a long time ago, and they're just, carrying that.
Absolutely. And it's actually really, when I work with clients and we do some ancestral trauma release, and I can hear or see when we release for the ancestors as well, they're like cheering. I literally hear them or see them sense some cheer. That is so amazing to see the ancestors that have passed they are being released as well. That's one of the things I
Did
love.
you experience that in working on your own family and lineage and challenges? I mean, did you notice within the people around you, the people who had abused you, the people who had bullied you, did you notice a change in them?
No, no,
No.
my family of origin was very much 3D, and they're very stuck in their own way of seeing things and not wanting to awaken to, spiritual practices and that. I guess I think they have a couple of them a little bit in their own way, but not, they don't, my family doesn't know what I do.
They wouldn't understand it.
No, no, they don't. In fact, I had one of my brothers say, I don't know what it is that you do. So
So they don't even have an idea or something in their head.
no, they really don't know what I do, and they have no interest in it. So
Mm. Mm. So, if somebody is listening to this and they're feeling that they're hearing their story, what advice would you give them? If they're looking, where do they start?
self-talk, self-talk. The self-talk can turn your whole life around. So two things: self-talk and ask empowering questions. Because your mind is a Q&A. It's always, even if you're not aware of it, it's always asking questions. You're always answering them. And generally we'll say something like, how did I get this wrong again? Or why can't I ever do this right? Something like that. Your mind's going to answer you. And it's going to say all the reasons you're wrong or you can't get anything right. And then you just go further and further down into that heavy and dense energy. So you ask empowering questions, that's one, and your self-talk. And notice how you talk to yourself. Notice how you talk to your body. What if you said to yourself, body, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you for being able to, support me in standing on my own 2 feet and walking forward. I thank you for, supporting me in picking up this glass of water. I thank my eyes for being able to, support me in seeing clearly. You thank your body. And one thing, I had one client say, oh, I'm doing all of that. But when she messed up something, then she got really harsh on herself. And pay attention to that. That's really big. Because let's say you do something, you take action, and it doesn't turn out the way you're wanting it to. You don't get the results you're hoping. And so you get really hard on yourself. What that does, that creates an energy within you. It's a heavy energy. It's a dense energy. So two things. Now you're radiating that out. And so all the people, places, events, experiences are going to align with that heavy, dense energy, and you're bringing that in. And now the next thought, action you have, the emotion you feel, the next interaction you have with somebody is going to be from that dense, heavy energy. And so you're moving forward in this, this heavy energy, and you're feeling stuck. And you're like, why am I always feeling stuck? And it all started with how you talk to yourself. What if something didn't work out for you? And instead of, being harsh on yourself, you said, you know what, I'll just take different actions next time. Or maybe this is a result that had to happen so that I can see it this way. And you talk to yourself from a place of encouragement, uplifting energy, support. Be kind to yourself. When you're kind to yourself and you ask empowering questions, your whole world can change.
You mentioned earlier, you listened to your guides. When did you discover that you had guides and that you could speak to them?
When I discovered, I don't know, part way, when I started learning about energy and started just paying attention to how I felt and learned about emotions and my feelings and put that all together. And then it was probably around 10 years after, so 20 years ago. And I started to realize I could talk with them. And you can talk with anything. In fact, there was one night, it was about a month ago. I don't know why or how it happened, but money, because money's energy. and the energy of money came to me, and it was like all night I was in this conversation with money. And I don't remember it all. I just remember the energy of money being there and communicating with it. That was really fascinating. I wish I could remember what I actually said and how money answered. But it was, for me, it's a sense. And I think that's one of my gifts, which I didn't realize, is just being able to sense things and sense energy. And hearing my guides, a lot of that, well, it's all about trust. If I didn't trust myself, I won't trust what I'm hearing, because it's beyond the five senses. You can't have any proof of it. And often in this world, we look for proof about things. We want to have proof. And you can't when you get beyond the five senses. So that's why trust is everything. And the more I trusted myself, the more that, like, they would speak to me and guide me, and then I was able to guide others. So I would say it was probably around 10 years or 20 years ago when it started happening. And then I realized more and more that, yeah, we could hear each other and talk with each other.
Did you have you thought about writing your story?
Actually, I think the first book I'm going to write, it keeps coming to me, is about money, because, I mean, we all need money, and it's never really about the money. It's about everything else, because money is just energy, and we decide the consciousness it's going to be. We decide how much money we're going to have in our life. So I think that'll be the first book, mainly because for years it keeps coming in, write a book about money, write a book about money. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I can imagine that a lot of people, and let's face it, we live in a world where everybody's traumatized emotionally. We've seen so many things that we never dreamed we
Mhm.
would have to see in our lifetime. And so many hopes and wishes for the future have gone by the wayside that I would say everybody's traumatized. It would be, and there are plenty of books around, but I think your particular story would carry, the weight of your experience and the insights of your experience and your training, to give people a step by step way for them to work on themselves. Because, we hear about going in, but many people think, well, what does that mean? How do I go within?
Right. Yeah.
Meditating. Well, often if you're meditating, you'll go out. You won't be,
Exactly. Yeah. That's true.
So I think, people need the steps. They need a guidebook.
Yeah. I actually hadn't thought of that, but maybe I will someday.
Yeah, maybe it
Put it
should
all
be.
together. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your goal? I mean, what's next for you?
Just to reach more people. That's really what I want, is to reach more people before I leave this earth. I've thought of that sometimes, and I thought, just everybody's got, there's a lot of people out there, coaches and healers and guides and that, but everybody is attracted to a different energy. It's not the words. And it's the words do matter, of course, but it's the energy that initially attracts somebody, and then their experience. So, and like you mentioned there, I've got an experience I want to share. So just to be able to touch as many people as possible and inspire and uplift as many people as possible. That's what I love most, is when clients, even if I haven't talked to them for years, they will email me and say, this has happened since I worked with you or since we talked. And it's just, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why I do this. That's why I do
Yeah,
this.
so rewarding, isn't it?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Um, if you've watched this show before, then you're probably familiar with the fact that we always ask people a leading question at the end. Steve Jobs famously gave every attendee at his memorial a copy of Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi. What book would you want to pass on to the guests at your memorial service?
Oh, actually, no, I hadn't heard that question. Autobiography of a Yogi would be a good one. And there was the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And that came in. I haven't even thought of that book for a while, but it's read it several years ago. But for whatever reason, if it was at my funeral, that book came in, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying.
But it wasn't on your list as one of
No,
the...
it wasn't. It was one of the books I thought of, and I was like, no, because it'd been too long ago and it hadn't. I think I'd have to read it a second time to really immerse myself in it. But for whatever reason, like this is when I say trust my guides, it came in, so I went with it. So that's the book.
Mm.
It
Joy
wasn't.
Baker,
If
thank
it
you.
was on my list, is that what you meant, on my list?
No, I wondered why it wasn't on your list. If,
Okay.
because it came in so quickly, clearly it made a big impact on you. So I was just curious as to why it hadn't appeared on your list.
I don't. I actually, after I sent the list to you, more books started to come in, and that was one of them. And there was some other books, and I'm like, okay, well, I already sent the list in. So,
well, we have a few minutes. Do you want to name some of them?
The Energy of Money. I thought of that one last night, and I'm like, how could I forget about that one? That was a life changer for me, and everything started to change. Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. Actually read that a few times, yeah. Wheels of Life. That's a book about chakras, and it was written from, when I read it, I was pretty new to chakras, so I didn't understand a lot of it, but Wheels of Life is one. Oh, geez. But I'm sure there was, but I know, yeah, those are a few there that came in after I sent the list.
So if I said to you, I'm going to take away all of those books out of your life, but you can keep one of them, which one would you keep? Which one would you want to hold on to?
Either Molecules of Emotion or, and I know it wasn't on my list, Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yeah. That book, Autobiography of a Yogi, is the #1 book. In 5 years, that has topped, the list of most recommended books. Who would have thought,
Yeah, that was.
And there's somebody who worked against all the odds, to do something really huge. Yeah.
Absolutely did. Yeah. Talk about working against the odds and the structure of this, third dimensional world we live in, and, the 3D world. And yeah, that's a powerful book.
Yeah, it is indeed. Joy Baker, thank you for adding your 10 best list of spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. Before we go, I want to just share a few reflections on what I've taken from your story and your list to share with our audience. Joy's journey is a reminder that courage doesn't always look bold. It often begins in silence, in stillness, and in the decision to keep going. Her story shows us that healing is possible, no matter how deep the wound, and that sometimes it's the quietest voices that carry the greatest wisdom. I think what stayed with me most from this conversation is how Joy learned to trust her own presence, to listen inward, not just for insight, but for permission to live fully. That's a reminder for all of us. The path to freedom begins with the choice to stop hiding. So I'll leave you with this. What parts of you have you silenced to survive? And what would it take to welcome them home? For more information about Joy Baker's programs, services, coaching and energy clearing sessions and her events, visit her website at courageinaction, great name, .com. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me and a heartfelt thank you to Joy Baker.
Thank you.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.